And then everybody does it, and everybody puts up their hand. Welcome to the 60th anniversary of the Metro Human Relations Commission. Our mission is to promote and advocate for the well-being of all Nashvillians. It is something that we do not take lightly, and it is something that does not come without its own consequence. But I'm encouraged today by all of you who found this time important enough to come together with us to share this history, but also to look at where we are now and where we're going. The theme is taken from King's last work, Where Do We Go From Here, Community or Chaos? And I believe even after 50 years, that is a pertinent question for folk dedicated to the common good to consider what that actually means in times like these. So again, we're grateful for you to be here, and I just need to do some protocol stuff. I want to recognize all of the former and current commissioners of MHRC, and I would just ask if you would just briefly stand up to recognize your presence, but also your service. Thank you. We tried to take a picture, and we missed a couple of people, and the photographer has asked that if you all could reassemble up here just briefly, we want to try to capture that picture. There's also in this room 3 of the former executive directors of MHRC. We'd also ask that you all would also stand. Mel Fowler Green is the immediate past. She's over there. Kelvin Jones, I saw him somewhere. And Rosalind Carter is right here. And the quintessential all-around Metro man, Herschel Warren, is in the building somewhere also. I lost count, and I lost count of trying to make sure that I record the, I'm trying to follow instructions of staff, and they would tell you I probably don't do that as well as I should. But I lost count of all the elected officials that are here. I would ask that you would just stand briefly, because we don't want to miss that you're here also. I was sharing with the vice mayor, who felt like she took my wife's seat. I said, no, we'll be okay, because without you, no, what I said was, we exist at your acquiescence. So you can have my seat also. Just a couple of things. We have launched, even as we celebrate this 60th, and we're going to try to take you back through some of the folks and the contributions that they've made toward making Nashville the city that it is. And for all of you that are here, those who are concerned about the common good, you know that that's not always been an easy way. Fred Cloud, a former director, called the MHRC the conscience of the city. And that's an interesting phrase, because a conscience in our mind is that nagging thing. It's that little thing that we can turn it off. We can quieten it down. But sometimes things happen in our conscience that we can't just leave alone. And so to be that, we take that as a serious, as a very serious warrant to our work, that sometimes we have to trouble the city. And sometimes it's out of that trouble that we can move and reach our better selves. And as I look across this room, as I tried to greet folks coming in, I can see that there are some seekers of justice in this room on today, many of which have been doing what you have been doing for a long time. And I'm just grateful to be in the midst of some of these icons of folk who have contributed to what this city is right now. Metro Human Relations Commission, we launched a Humans Over Hate campaign. For the last several years, almost decade, we've seen the rise of hate all over our country, our state, and even here in our city. We've seen how hate has become part of the political rhetoric. We see that hate can come from various religious groups. We see that even folk and groups who can be victims of hate can also be perpetrators of hate also. And so we've taken on a Herculean task of just trying to make us more aware about how we may contribute to this environment of hate that seeks to devalue and dehumanize and demonize others purely because we're different. And the idea of our differences should also, I believe, make us consider the things that we have in common. And so in this initiative that we're starting, there'll be several aspects, and we're grateful for all of the partners who are joining on with us, such as Humanities Tennessee, Millions of Conversations, and other groups that I just bullet because I tried to call that from memory, but we're grateful for the organizations who want to take part in this. One of the initiatives of Humans Over Hate will be No Hate on My Plate, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. So, but I think sometimes just bringing it and making us aware. So on everybody's table is a couple of pledges and pens that are in the baskets. We would ask you that you would consider before you leave one of those two pledges as it relates to hate. We ask that you would sign your name so that we can compile this, and because if you can commit to making a difference, I just believe sometimes differences can happen. And even as we raise our kids and even as we listen to how hate has become a normal narrative, and so often we listen to it and we never push back against it. And so we're calling and we're challenging those who are interested in the common good to be mindful that we all have a part that we can play in this. I'm going to go ahead on and get started. I'm sure I'm going to get checked because I missed something. Yes, you can check on I Am Over Hate, at I Am Over Hate, for updates about the Humans Over Hate. And you can also go to humansoverhate.org to sign up to host or to volunteer as these efforts continue to come along. As part of this, capturing the 60 years in the life of this city, we were able to put together a team to produce a documentary. We want to show you just a little intro to that, and immediately after that, we're going to ask that Rabbi Cantor prepare to come and give remarks. So at this time, we'd like for you to turn your attention to just a little snippet of the documentary that will be coming out, that will be shown on Nashville Public Television about the work of this great organization.
The same state where the Ku Klux Klan were founded is also the same state where there was training to help people in unions. A Rosa Parks, a young Dr. King, they go to Highlander School and are trained in how we help the average person feel as though they have an equal chance.
The Human Relations Commission's, I think, value to me means accountability to the people and ensuring that the people's interests are first and foremost taken into account rather than the city.
I think it's important because especially for cities that are diverse or becoming increasingly diverse, to make sure that those voices are heard and that all people from all groups are respected. And that's the role of government, is to serve everybody, regardless of category.
there has to be a place of where we can come and embrace a common table, realizing that there are differences, but at the same time that there are differences, there's something that has attracted all of us to this city. And the commission, in my opinion, is a place where those conversations can be had.
Mayor Bredesen had this uncanny ability to select such different people and with different lived experience. And one of the reasons why I think I was selected is because I was very involved with, issues around domestic violence and women and girls and children in foster care and social justice issues. And we were all really different, but it was like we were holding hands. There were parts of us that were absolutely in unison, almost from day one. It was unbelievable.
We're at a time where our nation is very divided, and we've been seeing a lot of expressions of hate. And having local agencies like the Metro Human Relations Commission is important to address, again, continued harassment, continued discrimination against different groups. And so I feel that the mission has to continue and will continue. I would hope that at some point we will cross a line and that we will move. Back when Obama got elected, everybody was saying, oh, we're in a post-racial society. And it didn't take long for us to realize that was not true. But the fact is we've moved quite a ways. Obviously, we still have a long ways to go, and agencies like the Commission are an important part of that fight.
And I think the Commission is, at this point, identifying areas where it can function in a more public way than it has in the past. And I think by acting in that public way in the present, it will inform its activities in the future.
I know there are issues with funding and how politicians view that. The Human Relations Commission needs more support from the community. We need to be standing up for what they're doing. They are trained. They are trying to be the conscience of the community. But if the community doesn't come out around certain issues, then you can always have politically where that line item won't be here next year because we have these other things that we need to do in that regard. Nashville needs a Human Relations Commission. You cannot be the bridesmaid capital of the world. You cannot be this top tourist place and people of color don't know if they go downtown, if they will be treated similarly or differently in that regard.
I believe every city that has any kind of diversity needs to have a Human Relations Commission to be able to have a place where people can come and to raise, not always concern, but to be able to raise ideas of how we can be able to make our community better. If it is a community and it is very homogeneous and they all go to the same church and they all drink at the same bar and they all pull for the same team, maybe they don't need one. But any place of where we are, as we in Nashville like to say, we got 80 people a day moving to Nashville. There needs to be a place and a commission that is committed to looking at that diversity and how the city can best meet the needs of all of those individuals.
Persistence and camaraderie are crucial to having the work abide.
It is important for people to say, for them to be able to continue to have the benefits of what Nashville produces. And even though they may not be living in the community, they still get to come to the Titans game. They still get to come watch the Predators. They still get to fly out of that Metro airport.
We have people from all walks of life who live in Nashville, who work in Nashville, who work for Metro Nashville. But we also are a major tourist center. We're a major convention center. And we have people coming from all over the country. And everybody, regardless of category, should feel welcome.
People are looking at us in different ways. We may not be as inclusive just yet as Georgia, but lots of people are moving here. And so the South is changing in lots of different ways. Got a long way to go, but still changing.
Thank you. Now, we'd like to hear from Rabbi Kenneth Cantor, who is the rabbinic director of Roots of Reform Judaism and a former commissioner on MHRC, but also he was in the pastoral role as one of the founding rabbis of Congregation Micah here in Nashville. He's also served as senior rabbi in Chattanooga, but he has been a contributor in a way to look at human rights. Most often people always tend to lean toward the religious aspect, but I also think that there has to be a corresponding humanistic aspect to what's best for all of us. And one of those voices and contributors that I said to him, I knew him before we met. Would you help me welcome Rabbi Cantor?
Thank you all. Some of you may remember the great writer Thomas Wolfe, who wrote a pretty famous book, and it was called You Can't Go Home Again. I left Nashville, a very different Nashville, 20 years ago. But coming back, looking around this room and seeing so many of you with whom I had the privilege of working all those years ago, to try to build a better Nashville. Well, you can go home again, and Nashville is certainly home. So let me say something, Mr. Mayor and Madam Vice Mayor. This commission in its present iteration, of which I was the founding chairman 30 years ago, exists because of the bravery and the strength of a mayor and the city council that supported him. Not all the city council, but some of them. And I remember very well that Mayor Phil Bredesen invited a number of us to get together and meet with him. Some wonderful people here today. Joyce Searcy, Sue Fort White on the video, and Sheila Peters. Wonderful civic leaders and important people, and a whole bunch of clergy of all different denominations and political points of view. And the mayor gathered some of us clergy people together. People like James Tex Thomas, the mayor of Jefferson Street, but officially the pastor at Jefferson Street Missionary Baptist, and a dear friend of mine. Reverend Steve Flatt, the Madison Church of Christ leader who went on to become president of David Lipscomb University, and a Catholic priest and another Protestant minister, and then they let a rabbi sneak on. And the mayor gathered the clergy people together and said, if you all can get along, you ministers, then any group can get along. And as you heard from my dear and treasured friend, Sue Fort White, and of course, my colleague and friend and great voice in this community, Dr. Sheila Peters, the mayor was right. If these people can work together, then they can help the city work together as well. Now, I have to say that we did get along. We became partners in the work of the commission and the city, and we created a friendship that lasts to this moment. And what were the issues of the day? That was one of the things I was asked to talk about for all of us today. Well, listen to the issues. The divisions of our community by race, or politics, or ethnicity, or faith, or schools, the concerns about hate groups, the concerns about minority groups at General Hospital when a Hispanic patient couldn't find a translator to be able to talk to his doctor and tragically died. And these were the issues of 30 years ago, and my friends, they are the issues of 30 years later today. When Dr. King made the term community or chaos, it may have been written 50 years ago, but they are the same issues we face today. And whether it was the civil rights issues taught to us at the Edmund Pettus Bridge or George Floyd rallies, the gatherings to support the hurting families of the Covenant school shootings, or the fear resulting in the explosion of anti-Semitism and anti-Islamism, our needs for a Nashville that is diverse and mutually respectful of every member of the community is as poignant and meaningful to us today as it was to us sitting in the mayor's office 30 years ago. I was going to end these words of my couple of minutes to share with you with something that was so beautiful that Maya Angelou wrote. She said, "As I gaze at my garden and regard the many colors the Creator has made for us, red and yellow and blue, white, pink, and purple, I also think of the many colors the Creator has made of us, black and beige and brown and red and yellow and white, and all of us are beautiful." But my friends, I'm going to end today with the words of someone I never thought I would stand here to quote. In a television commercial about tolerance, Snoop Dogg said the following words: "I hate that things are so bad that we have to do a television commercial about it." No words could be more true as we honor these 60 years of men and women, many here today, and sadly, many who have gone to the blessings of life eternal, to make Nashville the kind of city we all want it to be. And I thank you for the privilege of sharing this time with you.
I've been around a long time. I've been around serving in public office. And back then, we still had a lot of discrimination. The time had come when we were protesting. And they always, every time the council would be dealing with the budget, the ones that were anti-human relations, they always wanted to try to get rid of it. But we were fortunate enough to keep it. I would consider them to be kind of like a watchdog, and whether or not we are including and whether or not we're being fair to the people that is represented here in Nashville.
One of the things that I think that I really appreciate about what the Human Rights Commission is doing is to say, like, no, we need to make this a city where people can flourish and flourish in public without the fear of punishment.
It stands in those places that a lot of us don't want to stand in, and we'll have the hard conversations. It's easier to avoid, but I believe we're not going to be a good place for any of us to live until we're a good place for all of us to live, and that's what the Human Relations Commission is all about.
government is our government. It's everybody's government, and they have a role to play as elected officials, as appointed officials, or just as community members. Everybody has a right to speak up and find the people who will listen and will work with you and fight with you.
The black community did not buy the idea that we were going to actually bring any relief of any kind just because we were the Human Relations Commission. We had to sell the point that we are valuable not only to the community, but to the government. That's it. The Human Relations Commission is a part of county government. It's a part of it.
Metro Human Relations is the closest thing that we have that's equivalent to a localized civil rights agency or civil rights arm.
For years and years and decades, the majority population has had the power, made all the rules. Research is showing us that that balance is going to be shaken up in a few years, and that creates fear. And I think that that's where there's an attempt to do away with all the agencies that support inclusion. So yes, there's still a need for agencies like this to help ensure that we are including everyone and that we do everything that we can to help them to successfully complete the run. Yes.
As you heard in that piece, former Director Moore that said so eloquently, MHRC is a part of government, but sometimes doing our job puts us at odds with the government. And so it creates a unique position. But we are part of the government. And so even as I've been executive director, coming up on 3 years now, that we've not always enjoyed the best of relationships with the administration or the council, because it was the administration and the council over 30 years ago that defunded MHRC, and it took the leadership of then Mayor Davidson and that sitting council to reconstitute us. You know how when your conscience gets you to the point where you don't want to acquiesce to it, we find unique ways to quieten it. Whether we medicate it, we come up with ways to quieten it. And we run the risk of that all the time. And I say that in saying that as I prepare to introduce the 10th mayor of the Metropolitan Davidson County government in the person of Freddie O'Connell, I can say this with integrity and clarity. We may not always agree, but he has, to this date, made space to listen. And to me, that's the first step toward reaching any type of agreement. When in the past, I have, and the commission has been summarily dismissed, I find it encouraging to be listened to, even if he's still gonna tell me no when we get through. Will you help me encourage our mayor as he comes to share with us, Mayor Freddie O'Connell. We also share one other thing. For those of us from out north, I'm from Cheatham, and I hear you back there. He's a Salem towner. Amen.
Now, I don't know if I should speak to Pastor Tucker or Director Tucker here, but Director Tucker, you forgot to tell them the stories of the times we say yes. So. But thank you for that introduction and for your leadership. I will say, though, if asked, I will deny that Herschel Walker ever led this organization. I do want to appreciate Pastor Tucker, though, in that pastor hat that he wears, for so often helping me relate just the two of us as humans, and that I think informs the job that both of us now do professionally. I do wonder that Rabbi Cantor did not quote Kendrick, but we can save that conversation for a different time. To my fellow public servants representing our Metro Council, our various Metro departments, and generations of this commission, thank you all for being here today. I think what's remarkable to me is in just the space of a few short minutes, even prior to observing these videos and just conversations here within this room, how much I've learned about those stories that don't always get told, about the little points in time and impact that people have just by being together for shared purpose. And so it is my honor to be with you today to celebrate 60 years of the Metro Human Relations Commission. And you've heard some reflections already today about why this work matters, and perhaps now more than ever, even 60 years later. But I do think it's worth tracing the origins just a little bit. I spent part of my weekend enjoying the celebration of the Chinese Lunar New Year with the Chinese Arts Alliance of Nashville, and their occasion for the second year in a row was right next to where the Nashville Black Market was having their expo at the fairgrounds. And both of these were great events. But in its fullness, that lunar cycle occurs on a 60-year horizon, and the last year of the wood snake was 1965. Now, 1965 was a year of big changes in the United States and some new boundaries established, and the Voting Rights Act was one of them. The Immigration and Nationality Act was another. It was the year of the first spacewalk, the first Super Bowl, the first stadium concert with the Beatles at Shea. And so some of these things are cultural items, but some of them are policy. And the Voting Rights Act and conversations about immigration are highlighting places in American society where we may lack some integrity. But closer to home, the first official human rights agency in Tennessee was established. Inspired by Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, Metro created this commission in 1965 to encourage fair treatment and equal opportunity for all persons, to promote mutual understanding and respect, and to eliminate discrimination against religious, racial, and ethnic groups and their members. I think it's important that we celebrate the Commission's chartered authority, which was born during a tense time and endures to meet this one. It reflects who we are and what we believe, and yes, the theme for today suggests this is a choice. We must choose to believe in community over chaos. As we took office in late 2023 and recognized the need for improving language access within Metro, we invited Director Tucker and his team to share with Metro Department leadership how the MHRC can help them do just that more effectively. We know moving forward, Metro's workforce is going to need the Commission to keep our public servants confident in the work that the city does every day just for doing the work. We just saw a recent example of this, and I want to thank Director Tucker and his staff for their focus on a successful outcome to the Metro Arts Commission's grants process. Even as we took office inheriting some decisions made previously, we're now moving forward in large part thanks to the Metro Human Relations Commission and its reconciliation process. The MHRC got parties together that resulted in a reconciliation agreement that charted a path forward to paying artists, and I appreciate the spirit of cooperation that was required to reach this joint agreement, and the work of the MHRC here was invaluable. And I saw Ashley Batchelder here, and this is worth some applause. It is a collaborative approach that Director Tucker not only empowered but enabled a member of his team to step into a chaotic process, stabilize it, and allow local artists and arts organizations to have greater confidence that our public art process will succeed going forward. She has agreed to a leave of absence from the MHRC to serve as interim director at the Metro Arts Commission, so that support continues. She is working hand in hand with our law department and staff to get this money out the door as soon as possible. And this is another tangible way that the MHRC fulfills literally its name, human relations, that have moved us from pointing fingers to implementing grants. Now, I will say, in hearing what has been said today, both on video and at this podium, there's been a lot of folks almost suggesting that something bad is about to happen to MHRC. It's not. We're grateful as a Metro government, and as mayor, I am grateful to all the commissioners here, past and present. Thank you for your service, and happy 60th anniversary.
I don't know whether I can deduce from that that means that we're going to get our budget request. I was trying to tease that out to see how that was going to come out. At least I remain yet hopeful. At this point, we'd like to bring to the stage our Vice Mayor, Angie Henderson. And as she comes, let me share this with you. If you've ever watched the council meetings, you see that there's often undercurrents in the room of how legislation has gotten to a certain place, and some folks are upset, some folks may not be. But you have to watch how Vice Mayor Henderson runs the meetings. I've always been impressed of how she can cut you, but you will not bleed in the chamber. You'll be in the elevator or in the parking lot, and as you think back, you'll say, she kind of got at me. But I think that it's that deliberance that also creates a place for folks to deliberate. I believe that deliberation is the way to get to consensus, but you have to have folk who are able to create environments for people to deliberate. I appreciate her manner. I try not to violate her rules. Will you help me welcome Vice Mayor Angie Henderson?
Good afternoon. Thank you, Director Tucker. That's very kind. What an amazing room of community members, active in Nashville's past and in our future. Thank you all for being here today. It is an honor to be here as the president of the Metro Council, representing Nashville's legislative branch, your deliberative branch, where we have those discussions, where we listen, where we bring those things forward for consideration. At 41 members strong, we are a representation and reflection of our city's beautiful diversity. We are a majority women. We have a significant minority caucus, a new immigrant caucus. Yes. We have a diversity of professional skill sets, religious traditions, and political viewpoints. And as I said from the dais at our last council meeting, diversity is our strength. Sadly now, certain people in non-local leadership are purposefully creating chaos, trying to overwhelm and divide us against each other, and would try to have us believe that our world and our country, our nation, our city were better in some mythic past. They want to take the very rough edges off our shared history and remake it in their own image. But while we are indeed one common humanity, we are not going back to a white male patriarchy. Diversity, equity, and inclusion are not bad words on their own or together in an acronym. No matter what is insinuated via executive orders or otherwise, diversity in an intentional, loving community is strength. Our world has experienced and is experiencing enough chaos, and we choose, Nashville chooses, community. This is an important pledge. May we all do more than sign it here today. Let us live it and put it to work together. I am grateful to the Metro Human Relations Commission for elevating and celebrating our diverse community. The Metro Council will continue to work with you to do the same. Congratulations on your 60th anniversary of good work, and best wishes for many more to come. Thank you.
I would ask that our chair, Ben Tran, noted scholar, professor, all-around contemporary cultural critic, and our present chair of our commission would make his way to the stage for a short conversation with a person that we want you to hear today, Sanu Shandy with Democracy Forward. She's a senior advisor. She has served as a civil rights lawyer for over 20 years, including in the context of workers' rights, gender justice, and LGBTQ rights. She is also a published poet and the author of the award-winning collection, My Dear Comrades. All right. Just so you know, Ben, as the chair of the commission, is my boss. So if you happen to see him as this thing ends, tell him what a wonderful job that we are doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, E.D. Tucker. I do think you do a wonderful job. And I wanted to start by saying thank you. Because when I first became chair, I said to Davey, we should really celebrate our history as a commission. Because it seems to me like the history of Nashville and who's who seems to have been affiliated or was a commissioner at one point. And Dave says, don't worry, I got it. I have this event that we're going to do. And here we are all today. So thank you to you and to the staff and to my fellow commissioners who I have the honor of serving with, and then for past commissioners who have left us this amazing legacy. So it's my pleasure to welcome Sunu. And she was actually briefly lived in Nashville. Your father was at the Divinity School at Vanderbilt. And I just wanted to ask you about your background as a civil rights attorney.
Is this working? Let's see. You can hear us. Okay. Thank you so much for the honor of spending the celebration with you all. I can tell this is a room of people who like to make good trouble, and so you are my people. So give yourselves a hand for being here and celebrating this commission. To all the elected officials and to Director Tucker and the staff, thank you so much for the warm invitation. And yes, this is my third time in Nashville. When I was 3, my parents lived in the student housing at Vanderbilt. and we have pictures of me enjoying the campus area there. And I came back a couple years ago and got my cowboy boots and enjoyed my hot chicken and everything like that. And then this is my third time, so I really enjoyed all of my trips to Nashville. But it was only recently that I came to know about the artists and the civil rights concerns that you all were dealing with. And I was very impressed with the commission and how they handled the matter of how civil rights should be interpreted right now. And at the same time, at Democracy Forward, I was working on this report about safeguarding and strengthening diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so our issues and concerns are very much aligned in terms of making sure that our opponents don't weaponize decisions that come from the Supreme Court and try to make people think they mean more than they do. That was going on for the last couple of years, and now the federal government has joined that. But they are incorrect on the law. And so at Democracy Forward, I'm grateful to be with litigators who've already brought 9 lawsuits against this administration. Yes. And have 4 temporary injunctions, so slowing down and stopping the wrong, illegal things. So just because someone puts it on a piece of paper and says they think that's what the law is, it's not correct. So I would love to encourage people to go to democracy2025.org, which is where we are collecting all the executive orders and marking who's challenged them, what's happened with the challenge so far, so we can all stay abreast of that. So that's where I am now. And in terms of my background, I started out representing unions and was in New York City representing workers. Then the bulk of my career was at Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, so analogous organization in New York, the New York office, for 15 years as a litigator. And the way I got to D.C. was I was called to be general counsel of the D.C. Office of Human Rights. And so after that, I went to Health and Human Services and Civil Rights. And I don't know if Layla is still here, but my colleague, there's Layla, my colleague at the National Women's Law Center, where I was legal director. We got to work on many things, including, you mentioned language justice and access. And, her team there worked on health matters, including access and health care, reproductive rights, and also so much more. And after that, I left the government the last time Trump came in because the people that they were putting in were directly opposed to my values, and that's when I joined the Law Center. And so Democracy Forward, I went to about a year and a half ago.
Great. Yes. So much has changed since we've talked on the phone and arranged for this meeting. And now the federal government is saying that any notion of racial justice is considered reverse discrimination. And the history of oppression and struggles against that oppression, they're trying to erase that history, to take it off the books. Can you tell us, as you're on the front lines, what you're seeing right now in terms of all these initiatives against quote-unquote DEI?
Right. So in this report, we talked about, at that time from last summer, about 80, 90 cases that our opponents brought in all different areas: education, healthcare, workplace, government boards, where they cited to the affirmative action university decision to say, you can't do this diversity measure anymore. And even though they lost a lot of those cases, even though the people bringing the cases weren't even people who wanted those positions, they often lost on standing, saying you shouldn't even be the one bringing this case. So there were a lot of technical wins, and a lot of cases were shut down. Sometimes they were settlements. Now, those people who were bringing those cases are the ones in the federal government. So they are bringing that incorrect legal analysis and putting it in DOJ memos and saying, in executive orders, go after the companies that are supporting diversity, equity, and inclusion, even though it's legal to do so, as the Vice Mayor was saying. The law has not changed. And just because you have people who are against those values in positions of power now. That does not change the law. And even Trump appointees, even Reagan appointees, all of these judges this is way too far because they've still taken an oath as lawyers or as judges to actually interpret the law correctly. And just because someone in power has an executive order saying this, that, or the other, that is not correct. So.
Can we talk about the specifics of overreach? Because a lot of this is the executive branch overreaching and testing how far the laws and the Constitution can be pushed and how far we push back. So one of the things that we learned, or we discussed a lot with the Metro Arts investigation is that, and Commissioner Charbonneau, I think this is your idea, your point is that we can collect data, we can study, we can analyze the data, even if we cannot only use race solely as a criteria for a selection process. And it seems like the overreach, the fuzziness, the ambiguity, the chaos of all this is this extreme overreach, right? And we anticipate it, and a lot of people right now are anticipating, like anticipatory obedience, right? Masha Gessen just talked about that. So can you talk about the specifics and how we push back and where we have to hold the line?
Yes, definitely. So there's already 2 executive orders that talk about diversity specifically, and they are incredibly vague. Sometimes they say illegal DEI, sometimes they say DEI. Sometimes they're talking about government programs, sometimes they're talking about looking in the private sector to see who are the quote-unquote worst offenders of this. So they are purposefully trying to scare people away from doing what's right. And so this is a moment where the private sector, cities, states must stay steadfast and take the hit. If it's a litigation case, it's a case. Because you cannot thank you for that agreement. I mean, this is a moment for true courage, right? I mean, we saw this history, right? It was not always easy to just come up with a new commission, and you have to fight for that. And you have to make sure that you have the support for that. And in the same way, whether you're in the private sector or any sector you're in, this is a moment where you might have to really be tested about your values, because this is a federal government that wants to retaliate and wants to come after people that don't agree with it. But that doesn't mean it's right. So already, and I'm so proud that my colleagues are doing this, there's already been a case filed against the 2 DEI executive orders. And here's who we're representing. It's filed in Maryland. We're representing National Association of Diversity Officers in Higher Education, the American Association of University Professors, Restaurant Opportunity Centers United, and the Mayor and City Council of Baltimore. So this is a moment. And also I want to say we're represented by Democracy Forward and Asian Americans Advancing Justice, because we are not going to be weaponized as Asian Americans either to say we're against DEI. And so this case will continue, and the main thrust of it is this executive order is vague, confusing, promotes one viewpoint, violates the First Amendment, all of the above. Because you can't just put out a document and say we're the federal government and you can't do your diversity measures anymore. That's not how it's supposed to work. Now, this is a strange time, because if you're watching the news, it is complete chaos, and it doesn't feel like there's anything with federal employees, with programs that's being done in a lawful way. Yet and still, I'm listening to these hearings where DOJ attorneys and my colleagues are on the line, and their attorneys come and say, okay, mumble, 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 okay, I guess we'll pause the thing we did, right? Like, they're strangely respecting the courts still, even though they're doing lawless behavior left and right. And so we have to use what we have. We have to use litigation and the courts as one of our tools to make sure that we stop these harms.
I appreciate that. And I mean, besides legally, I think it's really interesting, because when we talk about DEI with companies or with institutions or with the NFL or whatever, we don't think about it as the constitution of the public. We are the public. When we say the common good, this is the erosion of the public for private good. And I feel like every time there's a good fight in Nashville, that's what we're fighting, because we define the public. But the public now seems to be shrunken, defined for us, right? And so a lot of this is just how we talk about things, how we understand the common good, that it's not DEI. This is who we are. This is not, we are the public and we constitute the public and we're a part of it, right? And I wanted to ask you, like, as the public, how do we make our voices heard, right? At the local and state level, at the local level, I shouldn't say state level. At the local level, it's very important because the federal government now doesn't see the public the same way, right? And can you talk about this notion of the public or how we even understand ourselves in the language we use?
Yeah, I mean, your question makes me just want to say everyone has a role to play because whatever space you're in, whether it's in the public or private sector, sometimes it can just take one person saying, let's look into that a little more instead of just saying, okay, we're just going to fold, right? You can have influence in all the spaces that you are in to do what's right. And I totally agree with the conscience point. And all of us, as a body, the commission is that, and each one of us have to be that where we are as well. And you mentioned about data earlier. There are so many things that are totally legal in the workplace and other settings that will help you to remove barriers. I was telling a friend today, the reason I'm at Democracy Forward right now is because I litigated with them when I was from the law center, National Women's Law Center, but I saw that they had put up a posting for a junior attorney. And in the posting, they had language that said, here's what we're looking for ideally. Here are the criteria. If you don't meet these exact criteria, but you have the background and expertise to do this job, please apply for this job. We would love to hear from you. That's how you open a door with a posting, okay? In my background, I've seen companies with the exact opposite. They have postings that say the candidate should come from a well-regarded school or a top-ranked school or all this language that closes doors. And so you can send a message with every document you put out about if you want to be inclusive or not. Similarly, Democracy Forward, if it's an operations job or a job where you don't need a college degree, they don't say you need a college degree. You can do a lot of different jobs with a lot of different background and experiences. So and none of those things are illegal, but those kinds of things would be included as quote unquote diversity, equity, and inclusion measures. And so I think you're right that we have to be better about explaining it. And also we have to name if they're against that. So therefore everyone being the same and not being inclusive, therefore inequity. If someone tells you they're against DEI, therefore inequity. And that's also something to name.
Right, so if they're anti-DEI, they're anti-racial justice.
Right.
They're anti-justice in a certain sense. And I appreciated Vice Mayor Henderson's comments because this is a racial, America can't think without race, but it's also a gendered component. This is a white male patriarchy that is trying to reassert itself. In addition to racial and gender equity, how are the LGBTQ community affected by these new intentions?
Yeah, this has been a community that has been on the chopping block since day one of this new administration. There was an executive order basically saying trans people don't exist, which we know is a lie. From all of time, my family's from India. There were people who were trans, centuries ago, being part of the community. We know that's true for the Native group and for many other communities. And I'm on the board of the Transgender Law Center as an ally and an advocate because a lot of times people try to say, if you support trans people, you're against women's rights, which is the furthest from the truth. And I'm so proud of National Women's Law Center and other women's rights groups who are saying, what you're doing hurts all of us. And the things that they're trying to do right now to say, if you look like this or look like that, that is hurting cisgender women who may be more masculine. Young girls are being pulled out of teams and being harassed and targeted because they may not live up to what quote unquote girls are supposed to look like, even if they're not trans. So this is hurting the community. And if you care about girls' rights, women's rights, then you have to care about trans rights. So that's one thing. The number of places this is playing out is tremendous. He then went and did another executive order with health care, gender affirming care. Then he did one in the sports context. Then he did one in the military context. The only thing that is keeping me going is that these organizations like National Center for Lesbian Rights, ACLU, GLAAD, they have all brought lawsuits on most of these already and already won. So in terms of preliminary relief. So both of the cases involving prisons and moving people around have been stopped by honestly not progressive judges because it's illegal, right? If somebody has been living in a particular gender and is housed that way, they've worked that out, and that is the best situation. And you're going to have an executive order come in and create violence and chaos? So thankfully, a lot of the nonprofits have brought those lawsuits and things are being slowed down in terms of those harms. I also want to mention immigration. And I know that's something you all are working on here and making sure that whatever sanctuary comments that need to be made is not illegal. And I saw that ACLU and Nashville said, see you in court on that. So kudos to you all for that. On the immigration point, I will say also really proud of a case that my colleagues brought with houses of worship. And, you know, to the rabbi's point and to other points that have been made, so far the case involves Quakers, the Cooperative Baptist Fellowship, and Sikh communities coming together as houses of worship and saying, why are you telling us what to do in our houses of faith? Okay, this is our right to have immigrant communities here and be safe. And there's no need to change that. So that lawsuit is going on as well.
I just wanted to emphasize that the criminalization of immigrants is unconscionable. And I wanted to say a solidarity movement in the sense that Black and brown folk built America. We are a part of the past. It is just not... It's just not a present issue. It is not an immigrant issue. It is a border crisis. They create issues at the border. And to create more legal categories, more difficulties, restricting visas, making temporary workers permanent temporary workers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think this is because I've been researching, Nathaniel Bedford Forrest held a Cooley Convention in Memphis in 1869. He had a holding firm and got a bunch of investors to try to create a company to bring over Cooley labor to replace slave labor. And supposedly Asian labor would be allowed to consent, and therefore they would freely work at a racialized lower rate and so forth. So I really appreciate that. And the people who continue to build our cities, to give our cities the future, our communities the future, is everyone, including immigrants, and they are not criminals, and I think that's terrible. So thank you for that. You and I both believe in the power of the word because we're writers, and so we know beyond the law we have the power of the narrative. So I'd like to ask you to close out with one of your poems of social justice.
Thank you. When we had our prep call, Davey and I were talking about Parker Palmer, who is a Quaker, and that inspired me to go and look up his work. So I'm going to start with a quote from him that I think relates to the mission of the commission. He says, "Our deepest calling is to grow into our own authentic selfhood, whether or not it conforms to some image of who we ought to be. As we do so, we will not only find the joy that every human being seeks, we will also find our path of authentic service in the world." Parker Palmer. And I do think sort of finding your way to be an activist right now and to rise up is crucial, and we need all of us to do that in whatever ways we can. And thank you for mentioning poetry. This is when I sort of I do enjoy being a civil rights lawyer, but I really like being a poet. And so I want to highlight an event that's happening tonight. Mary, raise your hand. Mary Anais Hegler is a novelist, and we put out some postcards on the table. Take a picture of it. There's not enough for everybody, but there's enough for everyone to catch one. Either check out her book, which is about environmental climate change and Black families, and really beautifully written. I had the thrill of reading that this week, and we have an event here in Nashville tonight. And I did my MFA in poetry about 12 years ago, part-time. I took 2 classes at a time, and as you can imagine, a lot of the poems are about social justice. So I will read one that's like a story, and then I close with a very short one. This is a new one that's not in the book. Being and Belonging, Unpacking on the L2 Bus. Entering the L2, a meeting in her headphones, the bus driver stops her. Half paying attention, she thinks it's something about her bus fare, but he keeps gesturing her towards him, and so she stops. He says to her, "Hope this isn't offensive, but are you gay?" She gives a complex answer involving phrases like non-binary presenting and queer without checking his box, but he understands the answer as enough of a version of a yes, and he continues his inquiry. He says, it's not that he thinks gay people shouldn't get married. He just thinks maybe they shouldn't be parents. And some of his gay colleagues back at the bus depot got upset at him for saying that. But what do you think? You wouldn't be mad if I said that, right? My spouse, often much less hot-headed than me, paused and responded, where do you think you got that idea? Let's unpack that. He said, well, I just think boys should have fathers, don't you think? And my tomboy spouse in her home with mostly just her mother and grandmother and sister came forward with evidence. She said, I know a lot of young men raised by their mamas and grew up to be fine men. I do know this to be true. He seemed to pause, and she continued, to be sure, a father might be a nice to have, but with so many separated families, that's not always the case, right? And so they kept chatting. And then she said she needed to get back to her meeting, pointing to her headphones, her colleague having heard the entire exchange. And it was not until afterwards, as she was passing by to exit the bus, just across the street from our home, filled with me relearning 8th grade algebra and our daughter learning to make the family home meals from HelloFresh, did she mention this part. You know, my beautiful wife and I might get a lot of things wrong, but I do think we're good parents to our daughter. She's 14. She's in middle school now. And with that, she went to give that bus driver a fist bump. And at that moment, at that bus stop, steps from our home, the bus driver got out of his seat. He came forward towards her. He came forward and said, may I give you a hug? And when I tell my friends this story, they ask if my wife is some kind of prophet, and I beam, because I know many of us like to think we have good hearts, but this one, she must have her mother's wild grace in addition to her own wild patience too. Thank you.
So much.
I'm going to close, while you're coming up, I'll close with this tiny little short poem. See if you can see what the metaphor is, but I think of it about activism and life choices and so many things, but it's about a toddler. Teaching my daughter to recap the toddler toothpaste. Don't push hard. Don't push hard. Don't push so hard. No need to press it so. Just place it gently on top. Let it settle into its place. Only then gently twist. Not that way. Not that way. The other way. Try one way. Try one way. If it doesn't work, then stop. Then stop. Stop completely. Then try another way. Trust me. Trust me. You will know when it is time to stop turning. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Yes. Okay.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for sharing with us. We're almost done. At this point, I want to bring to the stage here Councilwoman at Large, Zofat Zora, who has So I guess I don't have to do the rest of this intro? Okay. All you have to do is just call that name, huh? But this has been a person that has worked to help and assist not only in the legislation that goes on in this city of trying to create a better Nashville, but even in her work of remembering our history, of embedding our history, particularly around the John Lewis and the John Lewis March, but also a great person. Real quick, I didn't know her, but years ago, I saw on the news where every time that they were trying to build a mosque down in Rutherford County, and I don't know if you remember, it kept getting burnt down over and over. They'd do something, they'd steal the construction materials. And I heard this woman's voice one evening on the news, and she said, well, they can basically do whatever they want to keep doing, but I'm going to stay here until it's finished. And it made me look at the TV. Now, who wants to stay in a place where enemies are showing up every night, but she makes the claim that she's going to stay there until the mosque is finished? The mosque has been finished for quite a while, and we just say, all right, it's yours.
My brother. Hi, everyone. Aren't you all glad you came today? I know I am. I did not know that Rabbi Kantor will recite the Maya Angelou poem about multiple colors and rainbows and all of that. But I wore my outfit because, like I told someone when I came in, I would not let them take my joy. As an unapologetic Black immigrant, Muslim, what is this again? American woman. If you all feel like there's a lot coming on, ask me. Because every aspect of my being is being attacked on a regular basis. I don't even know which one to talk about, whether it's being Black and the DEI, whether it's an immigrant and the mass deportation, whether it's the ludicrous plan to take over Palestine and build a resort. There's so much going on. But I'm glad that I came today because some of the things that we heard are some of the things that I wanted to share with you. So they did half of the job for me. So as a community, how do we not let that chaos bog us down? And the first is mental. We don't let them win. And we were just told that we have options, that half of what they're saying is a lie, and that we can challenge it. So that in itself should make us smile. Because when we believe they have the power to do all that they said they were going to do, half of the battle is lost. So for us, that mental win is very critical. So today I wanted to share with you 3 things that I think kept me going, that I hope will keep all of you going. I call it 3 C's. Although chaos is a C too, how ironic. The first is courage. There's a lot happening now, but we're very lucky. Lucky in the sense that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. What is happening now is happened before. There were people that had to make decisions without knowing where to go. It's happening to us at a time when we can refer back to people in the past and what they did. How lucky are we? One of my favorite quotes comes from Diane Nash. When I think about the people that had to stand up and say, we're not going to take this anymore, we want to desegregate the counter. When I think about Harriet Tubman and the Underground Railroad, when I think about what makes people stand and say, we're not doing this anymore, what is their motivation? I find a couple. Diana said this last April when she was here, and it's one of our quotes that I love the most. What makes people say no? She said, oppression always requires the participation of the oppressed. And the role of the oppressed is to withdraw their cooperation. I'm not going to let you oppress me. The first thing I'm going to say, I'm not cooperating with that oppression. I'm not going to allow you to oppress me. I'm not going to douse myself with gasoline and go sit near a fire when I know you wanted to roast me. I would not do that, and that's the first thing that we do. Think about the people that came before us. What did they do? The courage that they had. And that should tell us what we need to do. The second thing I want to share with you is the community. This is our world, this is our life, this is our time. Diana said, when all of that was happening, one of the things that kept them going, they were thinking about their grandchildren. When they were fighting, they were not just fighting for themselves. They want a better world for those that are to come. So this is your time. There's no back of the bus to get up from. There's no lunch counters to desegregate. This is your time. This is your battle. You can't go back 60 years. They already did that. That's already done, gone. But what are you doing for your grandchildren? How do you make this a better place for generations to come? How do you not cower in fear and be disabled to the point where you're not doing anything? This is our world. This is our life. And we must protect it. The other C that I'm going to share with you is collaboration. We're not going to do this alone. Because they are banking on all of us to be so focused on our own fight, we forget our neighbors. They want us to be consumed by our problem, that we don't care about what's happening next to the others. And the only way we're going to get out of this, we have to work together. So, as the Black, Muslim, immigrant woman, I'm going to show up for the immigrant community when it happens. I'll be there when my Black is being attacked. I'm going to be there when the LGBTQ community is being attacked. I'm going to be there as a Muslim woman. I'll be there at the synagogue. Because we have to stand with each other. And we have to. There's power in collaboration. There's a lot of resources among us. There are people that are smarter than me in this room. I got a big mouth, but I can't write much. My daughters will tell you that. But there are people that can write. There are people that can do so many things. There's so many ways. We need each and every one of us. And I think that's how we're going to do it. So we're going to continue to stand together. We're going to continue to build together. And that's the other C that I want to tell you. I'm so grateful for the MHRC, for the people that thought about this organization 60 years ago. I'm grateful for Democracy Forward, people now that are thinking about what do we do now. I'm grateful for each and every one of you, because I know when I look back, I'm going to see you there. And that's what's going to keep me going. So, many years ago during the last election, I was in gray and black. This time around, they're going to continue to see my color of rainbows. Because I will not, and I refuse to let them take my joy. I will not participate in my own oppression. So we will have courage. We will remember our community. Above all else, we will collaborate. Thank you.
That's why you put some people down to do cleanup. So grateful for those words. I want to do just a couple things, and we're getting ready to get out of here in less than 5 minutes. I need the staff of MHRC to stand. Mark Etherly, Crystal Cockrell, Kathy Carrillo, Daniel Yoon, and Ashley Batchelder. This is our total staff that we do amazing work with. So whatever credit folks try to heap up on me, it's kind of like the Wizard of Oz movie. This is the look behind the curtain, that for whatever you want to attribute to me, it is the direct result of the commitment of these folks to stuff before they even came on board for this as a job. And I'm grateful to the people who back me up every day. Also, we want to thank Nashville Public Library for the displays, all of our partners and table hosts. We also want to thank MCC for the use of this space. We want to thank Mojo. We want to thank 353, who did the documentary and the videos, and everyone to help us make this a successful event. I'm going to do this because if I don't, I will pay for it later. But it is, I think, very proper. Vivian Wilhoit, sitting to my right here, has at her table some of the remaining freedom riders and sit-in icons. And if they would just stand, Etta Simpson-Ray, Joanne Jones, Novella Page, Mary Jean Smith, Troy Merritt, who was unable to attend, Freddie Leonard, Joe Goldthwait. These are individuals who have put their time in, and they issue us a challenge just by their very presence. They put their time in. When are we going to put our time in? Thank you so much for joining us today. We want to remind you about the pledges, and we want to capture these. We'd like for you to get on our email list, so put your email down. And there are two distinct pledges. I pledge to reject racism, resist bigotry, and rise against all forms of hate in our city. In Nashville, love is louder than prejudice. And I will use my voice, actions, and influence to create a community where everyone belongs. That's one pledge. Another pledge is I pledge to embrace diversity and stand against discrimination in all of its forms. Harmony happens when we choose inclusion over intolerance, and I will help make Nashville a place where all people are valued and heard. Many of us come to this from our various places. Some come from faith, some come from academia, some come from different faiths, some come from politics. But I think that there's a place where we all should come from, and that's our common humanity. I'm a preacher of some sort, I guess, but I love sayings, and there's a couple that I want to share with you as we close here today. One is, everything legal ain't right. And we as people have to remember that, because so often we are stymied by what the law is. Slavery was legal, don't forget that. That women couldn't vote was a matter of the law. And so we're often confronted with folk who claim that something is illegal, but there has to be something in our common humanity that calls us above the simplicity of the law. Yes, they would like to claim that there is a rule of law, but there should be a rule of humanity. And that moral high ground is what has to be used to call the law into question. If not, Plessy versus Ferguson stood for 50 years, but people kept calling it out for 50 years because everything legal ain't right. And for folk who are seekers of the common good, we would ask that you would consider that. Secondly is, when love is not the law, power and authority become necessary for social order. Love is not the law in our world. So power and authority are necessary for us to have social order. It ought not be that way, but love is not the law. And so we have to make sure that we put pressure on the power and authority that even if we cannot ascribe to love, which to me is not some running through a field with soft music playing, everybody in slow motion, and the daffodils are out. It is as simple as me desiring for you that which I most desire for myself. I think that gets us close to love. But even if not, King in his book, that is the theme of this, calls us to be reminded that just as in our religions, whether it's the Bible, whether it's other books of faith, we all have sacred documents. And King said that our democracy also has sacred documents. And somebody has to make these sacred documents stand up for what they profess. And so even as we come in from our places of faith and we come around this work, we all not forget that that sacred document that may have led you into this space has a sacred document that we should all gather around. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, among them being life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We, in our humanness, can make this requirement, but it takes us, as Councilwoman Zofat said, we can't do it by ourselves. We must do it together. And for organizations like MHRC, who's been out here, we need your help and your support, because I believe that whatever it is about America cannot be found in her past. Whatever it is around this idea of making America great again is not where we should be going. Our greatness is still out in front of us, and we ought to all aspire to making all of us feel that we're part of this country and that there's still work to do. I'm honored to be the ED of MHRC at this particular place in time, and I'm also grateful that we had this opportunity to share this 60th anniversary to make us think about where we are right now. And if you know your history, this is not a new place, but some of us are new people. I'm grateful to the people who set in at counters, who show us a way forward. Power never concedes anything without a demand. And we need folks today who are willing to put themselves on the line, not only for themselves, but for those who may not have a voice, for those who've been pushed to the margins. Again, thank you all for coming out to share with us today, and we wish you much peace. Thank you.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information on this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.